thinking about the seminar at our Extension and International Education Special Interest Group, Nancy Connor, who was our chair, said, think about Kansas City. What about it focuses on extension, also outreach? And as we were looking at that, we said there's some amazing people, there's some outstanding programs out there, and we really couldn't manage just one person. And so for that reason, we asked 4 outstanding individuals coming from Extension, Communications, and Agribusiness to speak with us today. I'd like to call your attention to a seminar brochure, and if you don't have one, we can certainly get you one. But it does provide a background on Dr. Knapp and his legacy. Also, it talks about our speakers, and definitely as we think about the theme for today, which is partnering for the future, trends in community, industry, extension, and education for agricultural outreach. Now, without ado, I will ask Dr. Christina Boone, who is our moderator. She's a professor and an esteemed department head of communication and agricultural education, to guide our seminar.
Thank you. Big thanks to Lisa for setting this up. She did a great job, so I think we should really recognize her. So joining me on the panel today, we have 3 great different perspectives to be shared, and we'll start, and we'll introduce the whole panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to Cliff Becker, who's going to be our opening presentation. Cliff is with Farm Journal Media. He serves as the Vice President and Publishing Director for the livestock area. He has a 30-plus year career in marketing, sales, branding, and business development. Prior to joining Farm Journal, he was with Advanced Publishing and really worked with their Food 360 initiative. He also chairs the Kansas City Agribusiness Council. This is a group of about 400 professionals in the areas of food, fiber, and agri-science related industries. One of the things that we like to refer to from University of Missouri all the way to Kansas State University is the Animal Health Corridor. A lot of these groups are involved with also with the Kansas City Agribusiness Council. So it's a very big, robust area in Kansas and Missouri, straddling that line, and it's beyond the scope of just Kansas City. So you have places throughout Independence, Olathe, all over this area, so the greater Kansas City area. He studied his bachelor's in animal sciences from Western Illinois, and he worked in the Masters of Publishing program at Northwestern University. So we're really glad to have Cliff with us today. On my other side, we have Wanda Nwakay. She is a specialist with a weird appointment. She is employed by University of Missouri as well as Kansas State University and is based here in our Olathe campus. Her focus is on food safety, but she also has a very strong focus on behavior-based programs related to food safety as well as community participatory research. She came to us from FAO in Rome, so we're very pleased about that. And she also previously worked at the University of Vermont. Her PhD is in public health from the University of Iowa. And our fourth member, I guess, is Tim Schaefer, assistant professor in communication studies at Kansas State University. His focus is on deliberative democracy, citizen engagement, civic professionalism, and public philosophy. He has a strong interest in extension, especially some of its roots, leading up to about 1940. Tim is from Southern Ohio, which we share an interest in because I collected my dissertation data down there, but his PhD is from Cornell. So I'm very grateful to have all of these panel members, and now I'm going to turn it over to Cliff Becker, who will give our opening presentation.
Well, good morning, everybody. Is this on? Good morning, I think. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my voice. They don't even need the microphone, you can all hear me, so that's a little scary in itself. Good morning. I really appreciate being here, mainly for 2 reasons. I'm excited to share some of the ideas that we have both through the Agri Council and through my real job, which is Farm Journal Media. So I'm excited about that. The second thing I'm excited about is my in-laws showed up last Friday and they're here for 10 days. So any place I can be other than home, really nice break. So thank all of you for the invitation. Second thing, they always say know your audience. The second thing is always know your panel members. So I am flying the K-State purple colors today. There's no Mizzou folks up here. If they are in the audience, my apologies, but that's where we are. Well, I am. Oh, sorry. Well, I guess yes. Oh boy. I've got almost a black sport coat. I guess that's close. You'll find out very quickly that I'm neither a doctor nor a professor nor esteemed. So I'm going to try to hold my weight up here with the rest of our panel members this morning. But what I want to do this morning is kind of take a quick look on both sides of, I think, the coin that I represent this morning. That's the association work that we do through the council, and then maybe any questions through Farm Journal Media, which is the largest agricultural media company in the country. So we have a very big footprint when it comes into communicating, educating, building resources, and things like that. So I'm going to try to leave as much room as I can for questions. I think that's more valuable than listening to me speak. So let's get started here. Just a quick historical content about the Agribusiness Council of Kansas City. Obviously, you're in a place right now that has a very, very long, strong history in ag. We're very proud of that in Kansas City, but I will say that I've been in Kansas City about 26 years. I'm an Illinois native originally, but a little of that ag and the cow town atmosphere that we all have a lot of pride in is eroding a little bit in Kansas City. Some of the folks don't want kind of that cow town perception, but it's becoming hip a little bit now that the south and west bottoms are starting to increase a little bit and start to develop. The development of turkey red wheat on the high plains certainly fueled Kansas City growth and the wheat trading and milling center of the nation. Ample grasslands and cattle, and along with that wheat pasture, certainly developed to a huge position within the cattle marketplace and the development of the Kansas City stockyards. All of this was aided with two basic natural attributes. The central location, we literally are the center of the United States as far as distribution goes. And then, of course, transportation advantages. I think we're still the second largest railroad hub, other than Chicago, within the nation. So we did emerge as kind of the trading center for quite a few of the different commodities within agriculture that stayed strong in that even up to today. As I said before, transportation and geography were key. The stockyards were established in 1871, and obviously, I'm sure many of you know the history there. A huge fire kept swept through, and the stockyards have now been closed for about 50 years. It had a capacity of about 175,000 animals. I'm very proud to say the stockyard building there, the one in the center, the old clerk building, Farm Journal office out of that building for about 5 years, and I got to office in that building, which is, believe it or not, it's a pretty thrill. It's still an amazing property if you have a chance to walk through. Typical Monday volume was 3,000 head of cattle. They also sold horses, sheep, mules, hogs, and everything else throughout that facility as well. And all 5 big packers at the time were represented in that area and employed over 25,000 people. The Crossroads today, it continues, as I said, to be still one of the nation's preeminent agricultural crossroads. The demise of the stockyard, electronic grain trading, the wheat exchange that was here in Kansas City, founded here as well, is now closed, and that's all done electronically as well. So we may not be as visible as we were a century or half a century ago, but we still play a very dominant role and is still a huge economic driver for the region. And agriculture still ranks as 60% of the jobs in the Kansas City metro area. So the council itself was formed in 2003 by a coalition of business and association folks within the city. Our mission is to enhance greater understanding about the important industry by joining together Kansas and Missouri agricultural organizations, agribusinesses, and other key leaders. The alliance includes it actually is up to 400 individuals now, businesses and organizations associated with the extensive agricultural and food industry within the region. We provide a forum for identifying and discussing the potential impact of emergent issues and opportunities and trends. We do quite a bit of work with other areas of the city and of the region, not just production agricultural, but dipping back in and through all the food, fuel, and fiber components as well. We also educate elected officials and government leaders. That's become a bigger role of the council over the last 5 or 10 years. We also advocate agriculture to industry, media, community, and the youth of the area, including a large cooperation with the American Royal here in Kansas City. We encourage economic development and trade growth and facilitate networking and strengthen communications among our council members. As I said, our membership does include a broad cross-section of the region's diverse agricultural industries, including livestock, crop processing, marketing, and other agricultural-related endeavors. Actually, if there's anything that touches food, fiber, agriculture, production agriculture, we have members of the council that do represent those areas. And again, we actually reach over 400 agricultural professionals within the area. I'm honored to be the chair for the next 2 years of the association. I'll just give you a second. These are our other folks that are on the board of directors. And again, you can see it does have a very strong cross-section of agriculture, production, and commodities. One of the things I want to do very quickly, I'm not going to read all these to you, so don't get nervous. But these were our 2015 meeting topics and presenters that we had throughout the year of last year. One of the things that we strive very hard to do is to have representation, again, across the whole food chain, and also to try to help educate not just our members, so obviously kind of speak to the choir type of position, but also draw on other folks that aren't associated with or have a true understanding of what today's production agriculture is, and try to help educate and provide resources for those groups as well. So in 15, as you can see here, and again, I'm not going to read all these to you, but not only do we have positions within production ag or through commodities, but we also work very closely with the retail organizations amongst our different members and in the community, and also retail, restaurant, food service, and other schools and associations to try to build our guests to these different luncheon meetings as well. Our staff includes Bob Peterson. He's our executive director. Bob has been a huge figure within Kansas City in the ag side. He also was the president of the Wheat Exchange and also was the president of the American Royals. We're very proud to have him on board. Real quick, I just got the 5-minute sign over here, so I'm going to rush through this. This is what I do for a living. I'm vice president for Farm Journal Media. I'm very proud to be associated with that organization and part of what we do to bring, again, ag's messaging, not just to our constituencies and our audiences, but also building resources for others to try to gain exposure. This is some of the brands that represent the Farm Journal portfolio. We also have about 71 live events that we do throughout the year that align to different commodity positions and or different topics. But two things that I want to pull out real quick. One is our Legacy Project. That is something that Farm Journal has been involved for about 7 years. It is a project that we do to build legacy back into production ag operations. So if you're trying to pass a farm or ranch along, we do provide a very extensive curriculum on how to do that. We have legal professionals, everything else that our producers and our audiences can use to ensure that the legacy of those operations continue forward. The second thing is our Farm Journal Foundation. This is something that Andy Weber, our CEO, developed about 4 years ago. Farm Journal's put about $3.5 million into it over these last 3 years. One element that I think is very useful, what we're talking about this morning, applies to you all as educators. One element of the foundation is what we call Hunger U. Hunger U is a couple of very large semi-trailers that go from campus to campus, spreading the word of production agriculture and modern production agriculture, why we do it, how we do it, where we do it, what it means to both our food supply, obviously feeding the hungry, productivity, but more importantly, safe, efficacious, and an abundant food supply. We've visited about 112 campuses so far since the inception of that program, which is almost 2 years ago. Many of you in this room may not have seen the tour yet, because again, we want to try to go to those folks that don't have an appreciation for what we're doing and have maybe a little misguidance of what we're doing in agriculture today. So we've been to places like all the California positions, even including our friends on the far northwestern side there, and also on the East Coast. We've kind of concentrated ourselves on folks that don't have a great exposure to ag. We're very proud of those efforts. We can talk about those a little bit later. So I'm very excited to be here this morning. Thank you for having me, and I'll pass the mic.
Thank you. Our next presenter is Dr. Melania Kay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here as well. So my office, actually, I work out at K-State Olathe. So those of you that are somewhat familiar with the Kansas City area, we're way on the southwest corner of the metro area here. And inevitably, you think, oh, it'll only take me 10 minutes to was speaking, I grew up on a farm in South Dakota. I did my undergrad at South Dakota State University. I was very active in FFA and 4-H, so I'm very familiar with agriculture education and so benefited from, my experience with FFA and ag education and 4-H and so on when I was growing up. And I grew up on a very traditional, corn and soybeans, and we had a feedlot, with beef cattle, and we had sheep and all that. So since then, I did my master's here in Manhattan, Kansas, actually, in meat science, and so I got to live in Manhattan. I had a great experience there, and then I've always been interested in international issues. I've always kind of had this, I'm very much a farm girl from South Dakota, but I've always had kind of interest in international things, and I decided to apply for a job with FAO, and it was a kind of an internship type of program, and I don't have a chance to get the job. It was right around September 11th when I applied, and I thought, okay, I'm probably not gonna get the job anymore because of, all the, kind of turmoil that was happening in the world at the time. Anyway, I ended up getting the job and was, kind of shocked that this little farm girl from South Dakota ended up getting a job with FAO, but it was, an amazing experience. I got to travel to, I can't remember the number now, I think 60 different countries or something like that when I was, this was before I was married and had kids and so on, so it was much easier to travel back in those days. And just had a, amazing experience, worked a lot in Africa and ended up marrying my husband he's from Nigeria, and in my field of, so anyway, I kind of have a little bit of a background in, more the kind of traditional agriculture, but then also, I worked a lot with very small scale farmers in Africa, of course, as well, and my job in food safety too. Food safety is very much something that's kind of at the intersection. So I feel like I quite often operate at those intersections. I kind of operate a little bit between, the big ag. I understand that. I kind of grew up with that. My brother was an agronomist, and so I kind of understand that side of things. But also, and now in my current job, I work a lot with small scale produce growers and small scale farmers market vendors, and in fact, we're having an urban food system symposium here in Kansas City, and in our Olathe campus coming up in June, because Kansas City actually has a lot of kind of urban agriculture things going on as well. And food safety also is very much at the intersection of agriculture and human health. So as she mentioned, my PhD is in public health, but my master's and my other background is really more on the production agriculture side. And so I think, so I was thinking, about the kind of topic of the symposium. I think in terms of trends in agriculture and agriculture education, there's always this, we always have to have this balance of, between, and I don't use big ag negatively by any means, but, we have this balance of, the larger producers and then also the smaller producers, and how do we all fit together, and how can we all work together and not be in competition with each other, but really, helping everyone to succeed better. And when we're producing food, obviously, my family still farms back home in South Dakota, and anyway, I'm kind of rambling here, but my brother and I, as I mentioned, he's an agronomist, and he studied ag education and actually ended up getting a job in agronomy, but he and I have lots of discussions about GMOs, as you can imagine. And when I worked for the UN, I worked for the UN 10 years ago. I was there 2002 to 2006, so I was there a little over 10 years ago. And we worked a lot with the GMO issue. I was living in Europe, and at that time, South Dakota was one of the states with the highest acceptance rates of GMOs, like the highest percentage of cropland was GMO in South Dakota. Anyway, we talked a lot about those sort of issues, and anyway, I could talk for hours about GMOs, but I think with a lot of these topics, it's really important for farmers and agricultural educators and so on to keep in mind that we're producing food for consumers, and now I live in Johnson County, Kansas. So anybody that knows anything about Kansas, I know when I was a student at K-State, I would hear people talk about Johnson County. So Johnson, anybody that's from Kansas, just people nodding. So So Johnson County it's the wealthiest county in Kansas, and I live in Johnson County now, and I think to myself, oh my goodness, my kids are Johnson County kids. I heard, but there's obviously very nice people in Johnson County. There's a lot of positive things in Johnson County, Kansas, but and I realize, my kids are only one generation removed from the farm. They're only, I grew up on the farm. We go back home to South Dakota to the farm, but they're already, my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old, my 4-year-old doesn't really know what a tomato is, and I think, oh my goodness, where have I failed here? But so it's been very interesting for me to think about, these interfaces of how, how we as agriculturalists and how we as producers can really help to educate, people like, now my family is one of those suburban consumers that just doesn't maybe really understand where agriculture, where food comes from, and is it safe or not, and of course in food safety, I feel like there's such a, there's kind of, I think there's a trend towards, the public is more wary of science. They're kind of, thinking that food processors in the food industry are kind of evil, and they're like guys and so on. And my master's is in food science, and a lot of these people that, sometimes I'll hear kind of disparaging comments about those food scientists, those are my friends, those are my, colleagues, food scientists aren't trying to do anything bad. We're trying to, help preserve the food. So, anyway, just thinking a little bit about, just some other trends and thinking in extension particularly. Some of you probably work in extension. I've worked in extension a lot longer than me, but, in the past, and like I said, I grew up, very much in the extension system. In the past, the extension office was where you went for everything. Every question you had, you could go to the extension office and ask it. And, and again, now that I live in a suburban area, I ask a lot of questions of my local extension agent, but, very few of my neighbors even know what extension is. They have no idea that extension exists. They don't know that, that's a place where you can get information, and I think it's especially true in urban and suburban areas that it's, extension really needs to be as relevant as possible, and really making sure that we're keeping up with, current methods of communication, as well as the content of our messaging, that it needs to be relevant to today's generation. And thinking about also, how is extension still relevant? I feel like, just in my role, I've noticed that, people that don't understand that, in extension, generally speaking, in Kansas and Missouri at least, those are the two states that I work mostly with. In Vermont, where I used to work, they don't really have local extension offices anymore. It's all kind of, there's been so much consolidation over the years, and they still have local offices, but it's statewide people, in local offices. But, having that local network is so beneficial, having the boots on the ground, people that really know what's going on in the local community, and I think that's something that, within extension, we always have a challenge too of really being able to show how that is beneficial, and to show that return on investment. And of course, a lot of states probably are having budget issues right now, and really trying to, if we in extension and other, if we can really work together with the industry, and really working together with government, and really partnering with all these different entities, can help us to leverage funds and help us to hopefully better show a return on investment. So, lawmakers can have an understanding that, we really should make sure that we're, giving money to extension, because they are really serving a benefit. And in my particular field in food safety, sometimes it's really hard to show that economic benefit, because, kind of in a public health sense, our primary job is prevention of foodborne illness. And so it's really hard to quantify, how many dollars you're saving by preventing people from getting sick. So, sometimes it is, how do I say, we have to really make sure that we're partnering with the right partners, and trying to be able to really be able to show that economic between, you know, extension and industry and so on. A lot of the projects that we do really are intended to directly impact industry and really trying to make sure that we're serving the needs of you know, small-scale farmers as well as other groups as well. And I think my time is about up, so I'll stop there, but I'm happy to take questions afterwards too. Thanks.
Dr. Schaefer, you're up.
Pour my water first there. This is quite the stand. Well, thank you very much for having me be part of this conversation this morning. I guess the first thing to say was I got really excited when the Knapp Seminar. A lot of my work is historical, studying the history of the land grant university and extension, and having great familiarity with the roots, I think, that are behind some of this conversation. So as I was thinking about today and where I fit in, because I'm kind of we're all kind of odd ducks in that regard as we sit together. But I guess I wanted to start a little bit from telling a bit of a story, and I think it'll help make some sense of this. So when I was beginning my PhD research at Cornell University, I was squarely looking at the way that cooperative extension agents and university faculty at land-grant universities were engaging communities around contentious, divisive issues, primarily in agriculture and kind of natural resource areas. And I was going off, I was doing some field work, doing lots of interviews. I had found the right place to do my work, and I was interviewing an extension agent. The county, at that time, they had a county director, and he was lamenting this work that some not direct colleagues of his, but who were at the university, who were committed to this idea of kind of deliberative dialogue. This makes more sense in a second. And he says to me, he was lamenting this. He says, "This is not who and what we are. We are the experts. We function. We are the ones who provide answers, and we shouldn't be doing this. This work is appropriate, but it's not for us." And he says, "Go back and look at our history." And he gave lots of examples of a certain paradigm of extension work and of kind of agricultural education through a certain lens. And so I took him up on it, and with great mentorship with my advisor, Scott Peters, who's done a lot of work in the history of the land grant tradition and extension. I ended up focusing my work on this interesting period from the 1930s and 40s, and Chris Boone was referring to this a moment ago, where there was this robust experience and experiment all the way from the highest level of the USDA down on the ground through extension agents across this country for about a decade, where they were rethinking a little bit of the relationship between these institutions, the university and extension, even a federal agency, the USDA, and the public that it interacts with. And I mention this because one of the questions, one of the prompts we had for today in preparation for this was this question: what are the critical trends that are impacting your organization's future and its ability to meet the needs of its publics? And I spend a lot of time, and the thing that struck me about this was asking a question: what do we mean by publics? Are we fundamentally asking a question of like, who are these people consumers? Are they buying goods? Are we thinking primarily or exclusively through an economic lens, or do we think more broadly? Do we think about publics in a way that is inclusive of what we've said before, and importantly so, but also to say these people are citizens, they are civic actors, they are parts of communities, they are not kind of cogs in a way, but are informed agents, have knowledge, have experience. And the reason I kind of start this way is because seeing the Knapp with a number of other colleagues in that period of time, Liberty Hyde Bailey is no one who really strikes me. They thought about what they were doing, their work through this idea of education, learning by doing, the whole demonstration method. But there were also robust examples, and Bailey is a good one from that period, who offered these interesting notions of how do we rethink the relationships between the educators and the educated, between the experts and kind of the lay citizens. And so a lot of my work, I spend half my time in the 30s and 40s digging through archives and lots of faded copies of carbon copies, which is very frustrating. But also amazingly rewarding because you get the opportunity to see how these people were approaching their work through extension in this very community-based kind of mindset that said, my role is to help foster and create a broader understanding of the complexity of the issues that we face. And so a lot of my work is from this program through the USDA that was implemented through extension called the Program Study and Discussion, and they had these amazing resources to create this. They created these materials called Farmer Discussion Pamphlet Guides, where they were talking about a whole host of issues that was based on the premise, the challenges that we face, particularly in rural America, but across the country, are not just economic in nature. They are complex. They are what a lot of people would refer to as wicked problems. And so they created resources for people to engage in these conversations in grange halls, tacking on to Farm Bureau meetings and people's front rooms, where they were discussing over a period of time a range of issues like soil erosion. What does it mean? They are talking about imports and exports, the tensions between rural communities and city life. So one of the titles is, how do farm people live in comparison to city people? Is increased efficiency in farming always a good thing? Taxes, who pays? What for? Rural communities, what do they need most? And so they created this space for people to wrestle with these kinds of questions in a way that, alongside a number of other programs from this period, were to help inform and shape agricultural policy. And I mention all this, and I want to bring this up because when we often think about, say, the New Deal or some of these periods, we have a very highly technocratic vision of what the government was doing, what these organizations were trying to do. They were trying to fix problems. And this was something very counter to that. This was an idea of, we need to engage people in a way that recognize their knowledge, their experience, but also to shape it through this primarily adult educational kind of paradigm. So they borrowed techniques from Chautauqua and other places where this was being manifest in decades prior to that. And then there was a second program that was going on, and they had this really lofty title. They were called Schools of Philosophy. These were multi-day training, if you want to think about it as professional development, for extension agents and for other community leaders and these often would be in conjunction with the annual extension meetings. But they were typically 3 or 4 days, and they brought in these renowned scholars from a range of disciplines, but fundamentally, they were interested in saying, our work is not, it cannot just be economics. The person who is the brain behind this, who was the assistant secretary of the USDA, who was an agricultural economist from Montana State. And he comes from this economic background, and he writes this important essay in 1940. It says, Beyond Economics. And it says, when we think about any complex problem, if we look at it only as we look at the farm problem as an economic problem, we're losing out on the philosophical, the sociological, the historical, the political, even the religious dimensions of the challenges we face. And so they approached both in the grange halls through these kind of sustained conversations, these discussions, as well as these multi-day kind of professional development opportunities for extension agents to think more broadly about the challenges they face. The reason I mention all of this is because there are contemporary examples of this type of work going on, which is what took me originally to doing my research that I told at the very beginning of this. But there are examples of folks in extension and faculty at land-grant universities who are approaching their work not from a paradigm of I'm bringing the knowledge, so to speak, but how are we co-creating a better understanding of who and what we are, and how do we allow there to be space that, as we think about the different sectors of our society, where we're talking about industry, we're talking about nonprofits, we're talking about the universities, how do these major institutions, in some important ways, these anchor institutions in communities, foster a more robust sense of what it means to be a citizen, what it means to be a member of a community, what it means as we were encouraged to think about, what does it mean to be part of the public? John Dewey has this amazing phrase from a book called The Public and Its Problems, when he notes that the greatest challenge that we face is the public not being able to find itself. How do we think about there being spaces where we can understand who we are in relationship to people, when we're talking about how we're interacting with people at a farmer's market, or how are we thinking about the whole array of people that you were kind of putting up on the slide earlier, Cliff, there. How do we think about it in our professional capacities, as well as our kind of off the job identities? How do we think about ourselves as civic actors? How do we think about ourselves as civic professionals? Not just utilizing our expertise, coming in with the answers, but how do we create space for people to really wrestle with what are inherently complex, wicked problems, where we can't just think about it through a certain, and I would suggest a narrow lens, that we need to be thinking about the opportunities that emerge from those spaces where we ask the question, what ought we do, rather than saying this is what's going to happen, and then trying to figure out kind of the results, or how to react to something that's been done from far afield. So I mention all of this because I think in the conversations about what's the role of agricultural education, and when we think about your example a moment ago, Londa, of the tensions between urban and rural communities, I'm part of a project right now exploring this issue of agri-culture. What is the future of rural life? And we've been wrestling with this for about 6 months now. A diverse group of people coming together, but it's been through this kind of discussion that I'm referring to here. A space for people to kind of explore possibilities that might be outside of maybe the parameters, the boundaries that we're accustomed to using or utilizing. So I would, obviously open to more questions going forward, but to raise that notion that when we think about ourselves as educators, as professionals, that we don't just go into a community and say, here's what you need to do to fix your problem, but how do we take the time to develop relationships, to engage people in a relational way that allows the issues to emerge, maybe in a way that are different than how we were originally framed. So thank you very much, and I'm probably pretty close here. Yeah, there's the zero.
I'm going to stand only because I can't see Lisa, which is tell me shut up. So I'm probably going to be echoing a number of the themes that have already emerged, so hopefully it won't be too much. It's interesting that this is the Seaman Knapp colloquium, panel discussion. Seaman Knapp was also a publisher, and so I think a lot of times in my view of extension and communication kind of go like this a lot. You know, they're kind of like a little DNA thing, informing each other often. And much of our theoretical base also spills over into extension. In fact, that's probably, extension kind of probably becomes a place where the agricultural education theoretical base spills over into as well. So I think it's kind of interesting that we see that. Again, we saw that with the National Project for Agricultural Communication, which was in the 1950s. A really neat program, if you're interested in that. It was funded by Kellogg, and really got people working to be more intentional with communication regarding the whole of the land-grant mission, particularly administrators. And then I think we see another time when this emerges again with the Extension Reconsidered project that Scott Peters headed up through Reimagining America. Again, some really nice thought-provoking ideas through that project, and I certainly have enjoyed reading much of that material. About a year ago, Hunter Rollins, who was former president of Cornell, wrote in the Washington Post about the commodification of higher education, and how that our metrics that often are looked at for higher education is how much money our students make when they graduate. And in some ways, this also relates to what we talked about with extension, is that metric, and oftentimes it's related almost exclusively to funding, which is kind of a weird way to look at things, given that we know that we're not just given in higher education, we're not just given a lump of clay and we shape it and it goes through the manufacturing process and the widget comes out and it starts producing. We know that there's a lot of other things that go on with that lump of clay. We know that that's a human, and that human is developing in lots of ways during that time period, and a lot of what they
get out of their college education or their higher ed experience is based on what they put into it. Well, that's also true I think, with extension, is that we can't just look at it as totally a metric based on funding and how much economic impact we make. That is a metric, and I think it's an important metric, but there's a lot that we do, and I think it goes back to some of those historic roots of extension in particular. Extension, some of the early work, if you look at that, and definitely I'm no scholar like you are, but I read a little bit. But it was about building people, it was about building democracy. It was about building communities and social networks and things like that. In addition to teaching you better farming techniques. And one of the things we've been seeing with our research at Kansas State is that the more engaged our extension agents are in their communities, the more likely their constituents are to adopt best practices, particularly in sustainability. That's where we primarily been funding to look at around climate change. And so I think there's a lot of things there that are going on, and we've got some questions that we need to look at ourselves and answer about things like funding, but we also need to answer that philosophical question about who we are and what is the work that we do in extension as well. I think there is a radical and very powerful idea that can also help us reduce polarity of these things if we think about how to truly engage in communities. And I believe that if we are really engaged in the 105 counties in the state of Kansas, a lot of our funding issues would probably go away. But that's a pretty radical idea, and it requires a lot of work. And so I think that's something that we need to be thinking about. Extension has moved our country forward, without a doubt. Extension has had a tremendous impact on it. We haven't always been great at following all of the needs of our different constituencies, and I think that's something that we're challenged with today, is really where are we missing the boat with constituencies? Are we reaching out to them? Are we really empowering those communities as well as to solve their own problems? And where are we heading in the different areas as far as like those we have not met the needs of, who are underrepresented? But I think if we engage folks, if we engage our communities as equal partners, whether it's agribusiness, whether it's industry, whether it's constituents, if we engage folks, as opposed to looking at it as an information model, we look at it as a communication model. I think that's going to make a very big difference, because even the term outreach means we're going out instead of engaging. And I think it's a very different mindset for us. But if we can learn some things from 4-H, I think that's a wonderful model, because you cannot find anybody more passionate about that program than your volunteers. Am I right? Like almost kind of scary. So it is a very, very community engaged thing, and it is the one thing. For example, we've got a problem right now with some districts who are wanting to break apart, and they go back to a county-based program, and the only thing they really want to hang on to is 4-H. Well, that's kind of a negative, right? But it's also a positive in that look at what 4-H is doing there, and what can we do to build on that and leverage that. What are the lessons there that we can learn from? So as a communication model and as a communication professor, of course, I have to bring up a little bit of theoretical stuff, and I think one of the ways that we can look at engagement in particular is kind of drawing from community-based social marketing, because through that we identify behaviors we want to work with, we identify barriers and benefits, we identify a strategy, we plan, we analyze, plan, those kinds of things. But to really know what the barriers and incentives are, we have to be engaged with publics to really make that successful. Otherwise, those barriers, we may come at it just from an economic standpoint, where it's not the economic issue that's holding people back. And so I think if we can kind of look at that model for community-based social marketing, as well as elaboration likelihood modeling, I think that's another place where we can draw from models to really inform our practice in the extension, to look at really how people are really centrally processing as opposed to peripherally processing, because if we engage them, if we really get in there, then they're more likely to more centrally process. So just a little theoretical thing there at the end, just kind of bring that up. But And then do I just, okay. I can put on my glasses so I can see people, that'd be good. Steve, do you have a question, or you're just harassing me? Thank you. It's great to have good colleagues.
Anyone have a question?
Oh, right over here.
All right, I just want to commend the panel for their thoughts. But I got a question since every one of you deal with the communications marketing aspect. That that's been an issue with Cooperative Extension for a good number of years. Is that we're the best kept secret. You are now hired as the national marketing and communications person for the National Cooperative Extension. What would you do to let the general public know about what Cooperative Extension can do for them? Because users know who we are, and they're our biggest advocate, but there's a large population that does not know who we are. But once they find out about us, they're our advocate too. So what do we do about that?
Well, I can talk about it from Kansas. I'd really like to hear some outside perspective on that too. So I kind of am, part of my department does market case study research and extension. So that's kind of under my responsibility. And we collected data. We're one of the few states that actually collect statewide data to look at awareness numbers and things like that. And so I think sometimes we're a little afraid of those data. So, but we collect those data. We've also looked at internal audiences and currently do focus groups to make sure our messaging is coherent to what our people want to say, because otherwise, if you build a marketing plan and the people internally don't believe in it, then it'll fail. So, so we know our awareness numbers are not strong, particularly in particular sectors, and that's a problem. And one of the things that we are striving to do is really build at the grassroots level the buy-in to marketing, because that's the more powerful voice, that vivid personal communication. I can send out a lot of statewide messages, and we do, and we do. But if I've got consistent messaging at the local level, if I've got somebody having a consistently positive customer experience at the local level, as well as at the state level if they're interacting with our specialists or websites and things like that, then that's going to be my most powerful marketing message I have. It's tough when we've got as much turnover as we have at the local level to have that consistency. One of the things that we're going to be really trying with our next campaign is focusing on the office professionals, because they tend to have more longevity in the community than do our agents. So that's one of our strategies that we're moving forward with. But it's a tough one. The information marketplace is so competitive these days. But I also really strongly feel that if I have a bad experience at my local office or at that field day, then that's going to go a lot longer ways than any of the messaging that we can put forward from my perspective. I'd like to hear what you think on that.
One of the things that I kind of leaned towards the last few years, and I even introduced our company as being the largest ag media company in the nation. I think one of the things we fall into a lot is the trap of kind of boxing ourselves in or titling ourselves as agriculture. And I think to extend our footprint, if you will, our communication or marketing abilities, to look at ourselves as food. There's not a lot of folks who eat ag, and they really can't visualize or build a perception. So there's a few things we're fighting. Marion Kemper here in town, who just passed away a few years ago, obviously Kemper Arena, UMP Bank, some very, very, very wealthy, prominent, but a huge philanthropist in town. Big guy, about 6'6", white hair, just a big presence. And he was speaking at another meeting I was at one time. He's an incredible man, wasn't he? But he pounded on the table and he said, you know what? He goes, agriculture is the best place in the world to be right now, whether you're a kid coming in or you're an old veteran like me. And there's one reason, and that's because people have grown accustomed to eating. And he's got a real point. So one of the things that I really try to strive with our outward communication, by that I mean we've got a constituency and an audience of producers who, as I always call our choir. We do quite a bit of work. We have about 65 million touch points a month through our farm journal media properties. Many, many, many of those touch points are not agrarian. So if we talk about food instead of talking about ag, chance of connecting better and showing not only what we are, who we are, but what we do. I just think that's a big part that we're missing now. People don't even align farmers with food anymore. And that's a really scary thing for all of us as educators, communicators, and people within our industry to kind of get snagged. So I'll pass the mic.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great comment so far. I know that, you know, the extension agents that I work with, they try really hard to do a lot of social media and, you know, in fact, we just arranged some like grocery store demonstrations and, you know, just trying to really, like, I keep thinking about like my neighbors are the kind of the demographic that I think, you know, just don't know about extension. They just haven't grown up with it, and where, you know, and we don't live in a really wealthy neighborhood, just a common, you know, suburban area. You know, so where do they get their information from? And one thing I just wanted to emphasize too, in fact, we just had a discussion about this yesterday, is, you know, obviously it's so important for extension to really keep that science-based information, that we are the source of science-based information, because you can find, you know, all sorts of information online. Like yesterday the topic was about how to clean cloth baby diapers, and like, you know, it's really hard, and unfortunately it's hard to find a good extension publication on that topic, actually. So, but you know, everybody else has information about how to, you know, clean cloth baby diapers. So, you know, so I think, you know, the people that I work with in extension are trying really hard to just be, you know, in the places where kind of the common people are, you know, where, you know, like I said, going to grocery stores, going to health fairs, going into schools a lot. There's, you know, a lot of, especially in the family consumer science area, they do a lot of programming with the schools and really trying to just get that information out. And I think it's also important, like kind of like you're indicating, to make sure that when people are sharing that information in the schools, that you know, it's clear that I work with extension and not just that I'm some nice person, but that I work with extension, so that people understand, like, oh, this information is coming from extension. Extension is a great source of information, you know. So, and I know when I was in Vermont, our director of extension there was very much into branding, and a lot of the people got quite annoyed, I think, with, you know, his talking about always branding. But it is really important to make sure that people understand, like, this is from, you know, where's the source of this information, that it's a trusted source. I'll stop with that.
Thank you, Shannon. Yes.
I have a question for extension, because right now I can see lots of grassroots agricultural non-profit organizations getting popular, and some of them take some responsibility for the education of agriculture as well as environment. So compare with those non-profit organizations, what the advantage and disadvantage of extension agents, and like in your professional perspective, how do we work together with non-profit organizations as well as the private sectors?
Well, that's a great question. And actually, what I'll say first here was what I held back a moment ago in that last question was there's this great volume from New York City on extension education. It's called We Grow People, and there's these profiles of extension agents, and there's this one line of this person who's doing an educational program helping people learn how to cook food, and there's this line, and the extension educator says it's not about the rice. And so fundamentally, what we are talking about is food, and how do we think about agriculture in this larger framing? Because we all know, we all eat. But there's also something more going on that extension does, and that's part of what I was speaking to a bit. But I think in more directly to your question, these other organizations that exist, I think extension rightfully has a role to play. But I think that there have been a variety of reasons that we've been boxed in, or extension has been boxed in certain ways, that other organizations have emerged, and necessarily that it needs to be this or that, but how do we think of kind of civic life as an ecosystem? And Extension is a central institution and an actor in that both provides the expert information that tells you how to do the things like clean up. We have called that pain in the butt to clean. So, hey, nobody got my phone. Just like my students. But there's also this broader framing of what Extension is about, which I think what I was alluding to a bit is how do we think about these organizations and these individuals, not just as providers of expertise, but bringing expertise in a relational kind of way, that they're getting at some of the larger problems that are not just like, oh, here's a fact sheet, good luck, but how do we have position ourselves in relationship with individuals, but also with other organizations that emerge, importantly, because they're responding to a need. And significantly, Extension has the capacity to draw on other areas of expertise and a whole network and a system that allows it to respond to an issue not in a kind of singular way. So going back to the, how do you clean diapers? It's not just a mommy blog that here's the one thing I tried and it worked, but how do we ground this in a field of scholarship and practice and allows us to react that's not in a singular kind of fashion, but it's this bigger picture. Oh, we work with this person. Maybe your challenge is not necessarily just here. We need to maybe bring in another specialist or somebody else. But that only emerges if we are actually interacting and engaging with people. So I think, to wrap here, the idea of Extension being kind of siloed or removed from these other organizations that exist, I think that's been a detrimental kind of dynamic. We need to think about where do we interact and situate in relationship with others, whether it's the individual or organization or whatever it might be. Because I think fundamentally what we're trying to do is improve people's lives and to make that better. And it's not always about us being able to tick a box and say we get it, but how do we say we did it in a bigger sense?
Sadly, we are at an end to our session today.
Oh no, I don't want to go.
Okay. No,
Oh
any
no,
other comments?
that was it.
Well, I do have one of when we collected our statewide data, one of the things that we did was we kind of drilled down to look at where people, for different types of subject matter, if that subject matter was important to them personally, where they looked toward information. And universities weren't real high on things, even like within the livestock sector, which was a real surprise to us because we're a big beef state and Kansas State has got, really great talent there. But what it meant, what it tells us is that we need to be messaging with other organizations a lot. And so not just engaging with them in problem solving, but also from that marketing standpoint, that sort of messaging with other groups that are those trusted community partners, or trusted or respected communities, whether they are a statewide community like Kansas Livestock Association or someone like that, or if it's a local group as well.
Well, shall we give our